Commander Scarix had conquered 47 worlds in his 3,000 years of life. He knew the pattern well. His ship would arrive, massive and terrible, blocking out the sun of whatever primitive planet dared exist without paying tribute to the Dragon Dominion. The locals would see his kind for the first time and understand their place in the universe. Some species ran. Some fought briefly before surrendering. Some simply knelt and begged for mercy. None had ever asked for time to think about it. Earth hung below his flagship like a blue marble, unaware of how small it truly was. Scarix's scales gleamed crimson in the light of the system's yellow star as he stood on the bridge. Behind him, 20 warships waited in formation. Each vessel carried a dozen dragons, warriors whose scales could deflect missiles and whose breath could melt steel. The fleet alone could reduce continents to ash. "Begin the demonstration," Scarix ordered. 3 dragons launched from the hangar bay, their wings spreading wide as they dove toward Earth's atmosphere. They were magnificent, each one 15 meters long from snout to tail, their scales shimmering like molten metal. They had practiced this display countless times. It never failed to produce the desired effect. The dragons descended over a major human city. Millions watched as the creatures circled overhead, their roars shaking windows. Then, in perfect synchronization, they released their plasma breath. 3 columns of superheated energy, each reaching 15,000 degrees, carved through an abandoned building the humans had evacuated. The structure melted like wax, and the dragons circled once more before returning to orbit. Scarix waited for the response. He expected panic, perhaps desperate military action, certainly pleas for negotiation. What he received was a simple radio transmission. "Greetings. We are representatives of the United Earth Government. We acknowledge your impressive capabilities. However, such an important decision requires proper consideration. We request 4 weeks to review your terms and prepare an appropriate response." Scarix blinked his inner eyelid in surprise. The translation software must have malfunctioned. No species asked for time after seeing dragon power. He checked the transmission again. No error. "They want to think about it," his second-in-command said, her blue scales rippling with confusion. "Impossible," Scarix replied. But the message was clear. He considered simply taking what he wanted. That was the dragon way. Strength determined everything. Yet something about the humans' calm response intrigued him. They showed no fear in their transmission, no desperation, just polite formality, as if they were discussing a business contract rather than their survival. "Very well," Scarix transmitted back. "You have 1 month. We shall return for your answer. Choose wisely." As his fleet moved to a holding position at the edge of the solar system, Scarix felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Curiosity. Perhaps these humans would prove entertaining before they inevitably submitted. On Earth's surface, the calm facade vanished the moment the dragons departed. Emergency meetings filled government buildings across the planet. Scientists pulled data from every sensor that had tracked the dragon's demonstration. Military commanders reviewed footage frame by frame. Doctors analyzed the alien biology from the brief encounter. General Sarah Chun stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching screens filled with data. She had spent 30 years preparing for threats from space, though she had expected alien invasions to look more like the science fiction movies of her childhood. The dragons were worse than anything Hollywood had imagined. "What do we know?" she asked. Dr. James Morrison stepped forward, exhaustion evident in his eyes. He had not slept since the dragons arrived. "They're biological, not technological constructs. Carbon-based life, though their scales contain metallic compounds we've never seen before. The plasma breath is generated by specialized organs, similar to electric eels, but infinitely more powerful. They can survive in vacuum for extended periods, and initial analysis suggests they're nearly immune to conventional weapons. Nearly? Chun caught the word. Nearly, Morrison confirmed. Their scales overlap, which means there must be gaps. Small ones, but they exist. And during the flight demonstration, we detected muscular movement in their throats approximately 3 seconds before plasma discharge. It's an involuntary tell, like a human inhaling before shouting. Chun turned to Colonel Marcus Webb, her chief strategist. Military assessment? In a straight fight, we lose, Webb said bluntly. Our fighters can't match their maneuverability. Our missiles would likely bounce off their scales. Even nuclear weapons might not be sufficient, and we risk making Earth uninhabitable if we use them. So we don't fight straight, Chun replied. The room fell silent. Every officer present understood what she meant. Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war, not against alien dragons, but against each other. Every dirty trick, every tactical innovation, every weapon designed to kill other humans was documented, studied, and improved upon through countless conflicts. We have 4 weeks, Chun continued. We're not going to win by being stronger than them. We're going to win by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than they can imagine. They've ruled for 3 million years. That means they've forgotten how to fight an equal opponent. We're not equal, someone objected. No, Chun agreed, a cold smile crossing her face. We're worse. They think power means having the biggest weapon. We know power means using every weapon, including the ones they don't see coming. Get me everything we have on swarm tactics, asymmetric warfare, and rapid adaptation protocols. And somebody find out if dragons have any biological weaknesses we can exploit. As the teams dispersed to their tasks, Dr. Morrison lingered. General, they've conquered 47 worlds. What makes you think we can succeed where others failed? Chun pulled up footage of the dragon's demonstration flight. She froze the frame on one of the creatures mid-turn, its wings spread wide, its mouth opening to breathe fire. Because those 47 species probably fought like prey, she said quietly. We're going to fight like predators. The kind that hunted megafauna to extinction with nothing but sharpened rocks and patience. The kind that turned warfare into a science. The dragons are powerful, Doctor. But they're about to learn that humans are worse. The countdown began. Earth had 4 weeks to prepare for a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The month passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Every space-capable nation contributed resources. Factories that once built cars now assembled drones. Pharmaceutical companies shifted to biological research. The entire human race moved with singular purpose, united for the first time in recorded history by a common threat. Dr. Morrison worked 18-hour days in his lab, studying the tissue samples they had collected from the atmosphere after the dragon's flyby. Trace amounts of shed scales, microscopic particles of breath vapor, even a single drop of what might have been saliva. It was barely enough, but it had to be enough. The scales are the key, he explained to General Chun during one late-night briefing. They're almost indestructible when static, but they have to move for flight. During wing articulation, gaps appear between the scales near the shoulder joints. They're only exposed for fractions of a second, but that's our window. Chun studied the simulation on the screen. The gaps were tiny, maybe 2 centimeters at most. Can we hit something that small? If we can get close enough, yes. We've been working on modified harpoon drones. Swarm tactics, hundreds of them, all targeting the same joints simultaneously. Even if 99% miss, that 1% could cripple their flight capability. What about the plasma breath? Morrison pulled up another display. That 3-second tell is consistent. We've confirmed it by analyzing every second of footage from their demonstration. Before they breathe fire, specific muscles contract in their throat. If we can detect that movement, we have 3 seconds of warning. 3 seconds, Chun repeated. That's not much. It's enough for a computer, Colonel Webb interjected. He had joined them, carrying a tablet filled with tactical simulations. We've programmed defensive patterns into our drone swarms. The moment sensors detect the throat contraction, the drones scatter in random patterns. By the time the plasma releases, they're already somewhere else. Chun nodded slowly. What else? Webb pulled up a star chart. The dragons are holding position at the edge of our solar system. They're confident, which means they're not expecting resistance. We've seeded the asteroid belt with kinetic weapons, thousands of them, disguised as regular asteroids. Remote-controlled, ready to launch on command. They'll see them coming, Chun objected. Not if we launch from multiple angles simultaneously, Webb replied. We're not trying to destroy their ships with kinetics. We're trying to force them into specific flight corridors where our other weapons are waiting. Herd them like cattle. Dr. Morrison spoke up again. There's one more thing. The biological angle. Dragon metabolism is incredibly efficient, but it requires enormous energy to produce plasma breath. We've synthesized a nerve agent specifically designed to interfere with their respiratory chemistry. It won't kill them, but it should prevent them from breathing fire for several hours after exposure. How do we deliver it? Chun asked. Aerosol dispersion. We load it into standard missile warheads. When the missiles detonate, even if they don't penetrate the scales, the agent disperses in a cloud. Dragons have to breathe, and when they do, they inhale the agent. Chun looked between her two advisors. So our strategy is to attack their joints with harpoons, disrupt their plasma breath with nerve agents, and force them into kill zones with kinetic weapons, all while using swarm drones that can dodge their attacks. That's the basic framework, Webb confirmed. But there's more. We've also prepared sonic weapons. Dragons rely on echolocation for navigation in vacuum. Disrupt that, and they lose spatial awareness. We've got laser blinding systems for their visual range. Electronic warfare to jam any communication between them. And if all else fails, we've got nuclear-tipped missiles in reserve. This has to work on the first try, Chun said quietly. If we fail, they'll call in reinforcements. We won't get a second chance. Then we don't fail, Morrison replied simply. 20-8 days after the dragons departed. Commander Scarix returned to Earth. He approached confidently, his flagship leading the fleet in a standard dominance formation. The humans would see them coming, would feel the weight of their presence, would understand that resistance was futile. The radio transmission came before he even reached the moon's orbit. Commander Scarix. This is General Sarah, Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. We have considered your terms and concluded that they are unacceptable. We respectfully decline your offer of subjugation. Scarix laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You decline? Foolish creatures. You had your chance for peace. Now you will learn the price of defiance. Perhaps, Chun replied. Or perhaps you will learn the price of underestimating humanity. This is your only warning, Commander. Leave now, or face the consequences. Scarix cut the transmission. The arrogance of these beings astounded him. They had seen his power and still dared to refuse. Very well, he would make an example of them. Other species would hear what happened to Earth and remember to show proper respect. All ships, prepare for atmospheric assault, he commanded. We will scour their cities until they beg for mercy. The fleet began its descent. 20 warships, 240 dragons, all moving toward Earth with terrible purpose. Scarix could already imagine the humans, despair as they realized their mistake. Then everything went wrong at once. The first indication was a proximity alert. Thousands of them, filling his screens like static. Before Scarix could process what he was seeing, the asteroid belt erupted with movement. What he had assumed were natural rocks suddenly fired engines and accelerated toward his fleet from dozens of angles. Simultaneously, evasive maneuvers. He roared, his ships scattered, their pilots reacting with combat instincts honed over millennia. Most of the kinetic weapons missed, but 3 struck glancing blows, cracking shields and forcing those vessels to fall back. And while the fleet was distracted, something else launched from Earth's surface. Swarms. Thousands upon thousands of small drones, each no larger than a human fist, rising from the planet like a metallic cloud. They moved with coordinated precision, splitting into separate groups, each targeting a different ship. Scarix watched in growing disbelief as the swarms engaged. His dragons launched from the hangars, breathing plasma that should have vaporized the fragile machines. But the drones moved erratically, seemingly randomly, and most of the fire missed. The few drones that were destroyed made no difference. There were always more. Then the harpoons fired. Not the massive ship killers Scarix expected, but tiny projectiles, hundreds per second, all targeting the joints where wings met shoulders. Most bounced off scales harmlessly, but some found gaps, driving into vulnerable flesh, trailing cables that tangled wings and disrupted flight. A dragon near his ship roared in pain as 3 harpoons struck home. Its flight pattern destabilized, and it tumbled through space, desperately trying to cut the cables while maintaining altitude. Other dragons moved to assist, but the swarms followed, relentless and mechanical. "Sir, we're detecting chemical weapons deployment," his tactical officer reported. "Some kind of aerosol compound in the missile warheads." Scarix inhaled to give orders and immediately felt something wrong. His throat burned, not with the comfortable heat of plasma generation, but with a strange numbness. He tried to breathe fire and nothing came. Around him, other dragons experienced the same problem. Their most powerful weapon had been neutralized. All ships, withdraw to Forix's command was cut off by a new alert. Energy weapons, dozens of them, firing from concealed positions on Earth's moon. Not powerful enough to penetrate dragon scales, but bright enough to overwhelm visual sensors. His pilots flew blind, relying on instruments that were suddenly jammed by electronic warfare. And through the chaos, sonic emitters broadcast frequencies that disrupted dragon echolocation. The battle had lasted less than 10 minutes. Scarix had lost 12 dragons, dead or critically wounded. 6 ships had sustained serious damage. And worst of all, he had lost the initiative. The humans were dictating the terms of engagement, forcing him to react rather than act. "Withdraw," he commanded, his voice tight with humiliation. "All ships, withdraw beyond the moon's orbit." As his fleet retreated, Scarix stared at the blue planet below. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had hurt dragons, not through superior strength or ancient magic, but through tactics, coordination, and weapons designed to exploit weaknesses he had not known existed. For the first time in 3,000 years, Commander Scarix felt something he had forgotten: fear. News of the defeat spread through the dragon dominion like wildfire. For 3 million years, dragons had been undefeated. The very concept of losing a battle was alien to most of the younger generation. They had only known victory, tribute, and the absolute certainty of their supremacy. The Dragon Council convened on their homeworld, a massive planet where gravity was 3 times Earth's standard. 12 ancient dragons, each over 10,000 years old, gathered in the Obsidian Hall to discuss what many refused to believe was possible. Scarix was careless, Councillor Pirax declared, his golden scales gleaming in the volcanic light. He underestimated a primitive species. "We will not make the same mistake." "The humans are not primitive," Councillor Vexera countered. She was the oldest present, her silver scales scarred from countless battles. "Read the reports carefully. They studied us. They found weaknesses we did not know we had. They adapted weapons specifically to counter our strengths. Then we will adapt in return, Pirax growled. We will send a war fleet. 200 ships. 3,000 dragons. We will show these upstart mammals what true power means. Vexra shook her head slowly. You still do not understand. They did not defeat Scarix with power. They defeated him with intelligence, with coordination, with weapons designed not to be strong, but to be effective. Are you suggesting we negotiate with them? Another counselor asked, his tone incredulous. I am suggesting we consider that perhaps we have grown complacent, Vexra replied. We have ruled for so long that we forgot others might evolve different strengths. The humans are weak individually, yes. But together, there's something we have never faced before. Enough, Pirax declared. The decision is made. We send the war fleet. The humans will learn their place, or they will cease to exist. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Vexra abstained. 6 weeks later, the Dragon War Fleet arrived in Earth's solar system. 200 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than Scarix's vessels. 3,000 dragons, the largest military force assembled in the Dominion's recent history. They emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and began their approach. This time, there would be no negotiations, no warnings, just overwhelming force. But the humans had not been idle. They had studied the first battle, analyzed every second of combat data, and refined their tactics. More importantly, they had learned the most crucial lesson. Dragons could be beaten. General Chun stood in the command center, watching the massive fleet approach. Around her, thousands of officers coordinated the defense. This time, Earth would not fight alone. The moon had been transformed into a fortress. Mars colonies contributed resources. Every human ship, station, and satellite had been armed. They outnumber us 15-1, Colonel Webb reported. More firepower than we can match conventionally. Then we don't fight conventionally, Chun replied. She opened a channel to every human vessel in the system. All units, execute Protocol Hornet's Nest. The asteroid belt had been seeded with more than kinetic weapons this time. Hidden among the rocks were thousands of automated platforms, each carrying clusters of missiles, drones, and electronic warfare systems. As the Dragon fleet passed through, the platforms activated simultaneously. The dragons had learned from their previous encounter. Their shields were angled to deflect kinetic strikes. Their pilots flew in defensive formations. Their scanners swept constantly for hidden threats. They were ready for everything they had faced before. They were not ready for what came next. The first missiles were decoys, cheap and obvious, designed to draw fire and force the dragons to expend plasma breath. The fleet responded predictably, destroying thousands of incoming projectiles with coordinated fire. Their commanders felt confident. The humans were using the same tactics again. Then the real attack began. Not from the missiles, but from below. The platforms that had launched the decoys now activated mining lasers, repurposed from asteroid operations. Not powerful enough to damage dragon ships directly, but more than capable of superheating the space around them. The Dragon fleet flew into a cloud of vaporized metal and rock. Sensors went blind. Communication systems struggled through the interference. And in that moment of confusion, the real weapon struck. Railgun rounds, launched from the moon, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. Not aimed at the Dragon ships, but at the space they would occupy based on predictable evasive patterns. The humans had run 10,000 combat simulations and knew exactly how dragons would react to threats. 8 ships took critical hits. Not enough to destroy them, but enough to force them out of formation. And where formation broke, vulnerability appeared. Swarm drones poured in, millions of them this time. each one smaller and smarter than the previous generation. They did not just target wing joints anymore. They targeted sensor arrays, engine exhausts, communication dishes, and any external equipment they could reach. Each drone carried a shaped charge barely larger than a grain of rice, individually harmless to a dragon ship, collectively devastating. Commander Thraxis, leading the assault fleet, watched his carefully planned attack dissolve into chaos. His ships were not being destroyed outright, but they were being disabled. Death by 1,000 cuts, each one too small to matter, all of them together crippling his fleet. "Launch all fighters," he commanded. "Clear these vermin from the sky." 3,000 dragons launched, filling space with their presence. This was what they had trained for: individual combat, where their natural abilities would dominate. They spread their wings and dove toward Earth, confident that no human weapon could stop them all. General Chun watched them come. Execute Phase 2. The space between the dragon fighters and Earth erupted with mines. Not explosive mines, but electromagnetic pulse weapons, each one strong enough to disrupt unshielded electronics. Dragons, being biological, were not affected. But the targeting systems on their support ships went dark. The fighters were suddenly on their own, without tactical data or coordination dot, and that was when the human fighters engaged. Not trying to match dragons in individual combat, because that was impossible. Instead, they used pack tactics. 20 human fighters would swarm a single dragon, attacking from all angles, forcing it to choose which threats to address. While it focused on one group, another would strike. The human fighters carried no energy weapons. Instead, they used simple kinetic rounds, armor-piercing bullets traveling at hypersonic speeds, all aimed at the joints Dr. Morrison had identified. The ammunition was cheap, the targeting was computer-assisted, and the tactics were merciless. A dragon could kill 3, 4, even 5 human fighters before being brought down. But there were always more humans. They fought with coordination, born of thousands of years, practicing warfare against each other. Every pilot knew their role. Every wingman protected their partner. Every squadron worked as a seamless unit. Thraxis watched in growing horror as his fighters fell. Not quickly, not easily, but steadily. The humans accepted losses that no dragon would tolerate. For every dragon that fell, 30 humans died. But the humans kept coming, and there were always more of them. "Sir, we need to withdraw," his tactical officer urged. "We have lost 800 fighters. 40 ships are critically damaged. This is not sustainable. We outnumber them." Thraxis roared. "We are stronger. We cannot lose to these fragile creatures." "Strength is not enough," the officer replied quietly. "They are not trying to be stronger than us. They are trying to bleed us until we have nothing left." A proximity alert blared. Thraxis looked at his screen and saw something that made his blood run cold. More human ships were arriving, not from Earth, but from the outer system. They had been hiding in the shadows of gas giants, waiting for the dragon fleet to commit fully to the assault. These ships did not engage directly. Instead, they launched weapon platforms that began constructing a perimeter around the battlefield. Not to trap the dragons, but to prevent retreat. The humans were not just fighting to defend their world. They were fighting to eliminate the threat completely. For the first time in the Dominion's history, a dragon fleet faced the possibility of total annihilation. "All ships," Thraxis commanded, his voice heavy with defeat, "withdraw at maximum speed. Break through the perimeter by any means necessary." The dragon fleet fled, leaving behind 900 dead fighters and 60 destroyed ships. The humans pursued relentlessly, harrying them all the way to the edge of the system. They did not celebrate their victory. They simply reloaded, repaired, and prepared for the next battle, because General Chun knew the truth. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. The dragons would not accept two defeats. They would escalate. They would call for total war, and humanity would be ready. Because humans had learned long ago that wars were not won by being the strongest. Wars were won by being the most adaptable, the most determined, and the most willing to do whatever it took to survive. The dragons were powerful, but humans were worse. And now the entire galaxy was beginning to understand what that truly meant. The war lasted 2 years, not because the battles were evenly matched, but because the Dragon Dominion refused to accept what was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone else in the galaxy. They were losing. The third major engagement happened at a mining colony the dragons had held for 800 years. The humans did not attack with ships. They sent automated probes that scattered virus-infected code into the colony's computer systems. When the systems failed, life support became unreliable. The dragons, who could survive in vacuum temporarily, held out for weeks before evacuating. The humans took the colony without firing a shot. The fourth engagement was different. The dragons, learning from their defeats, abandoned their reliance on individual strength. They implemented human-style tactics, fleet coordination, tactical planning. They hired military advisors from other species. They studied every piece of data from their losses. They met the human fleet at a contested system and fought brilliantly. The battle lasted 18 hours and resulted in a stalemate. Both sides withdrew with heavy losses. The dragons celebrated what they saw as a turning point, but General Chun understood what her dragon counterpart did not. Humanity could replace its losses in months. The dragons, with their slow reproduction rate and 1,000-year lifespans, could not. Every dragon that died was a loss the Dominion could not recover from quickly. Attrition favored humanity by every metric that mattered. The fifth engagement never happened. The humans bypassed the dragon fleet entirely and struck at their supply lines. Freighters carrying fuel and materials suddenly disappeared. Trade routes became dangerous. Subject species, watching the dragons struggle, began to question whether their overlords were truly invincible. Some species started rebelling, not with military force, but with passive resistance. Ships delayed. Cargo went missing. Intelligence was leaked to human sources. The Dominion, which had ruled through fear and power, discovered that fear evaporated when power proved insufficient. Counselor Vexera had watched all of this unfold with grim certainty. She had warned them. She had told them the humans were different. But pride and 3 million years of dominance had made her fellow counselors deaf to reason. Now, she stood before the council again, but this time the mood was very different. Where there had been confidence, there was now uncertainty. Where there had been dismissal, there was now fear. "We have lost 32 systems," she said quietly. 3,000 dragons dead. 15,000 wounded. Our subject species are in open revolt across 17 sectors. Our economy is collapsing under the strain of maintaining a war machine against an enemy that refuses to fight the way we expect. "Then we will unleash total warfare," Pirax declared. Though his voice lacked its former certainty. "We will use planet-killing weapons. We will make examples so terrible that the humans will have no choice but to surrender." "And then what?" Vexera asked. "Even if we destroy Earth, the humans have already spread to dozens of systems. They have allies now, species that see them as liberators from our rule. If we use planet killers, we prove we are the monsters they claim we are, and every species in the galaxy will unite against us." "You propose surrender?" Another counselor hissed. "I propose we acknowledge reality," Vexera replied. "We cannot win this war, not because we are weak, but because strength alone is not enough. The humans have spent their entire existence fighting each other. They have refined warfare into a science. We treated it as a demonstration of power. We are dragons," Pirax said. but even he sounded uncertain now. "We have ruled for 3 million years, and we will continue to rule," Vexera said, "if we are wise enough to make peace before we have nothing left to rule with." The debate lasted for days. In the end, pragmatism won over pride. The Dragon Council authorized Vexera to negotiate with the humans. The treaty summit took place on a neutral station, one built by a species that have remained carefully uninvolved in the conflict. Councillor Vengera arrived with a small delegation, her silver scales seeming dimmer than they once had. General Chun arrived with Colonel Webb and Dr. Morrison, representing the military and scientific achievements that had won the war. They met in a chamber designed for beings of vastly different sizes. Vexera towered over the humans, but the power dynamic had shifted in ways that physical size could not measure. "You have defeated us," Vexera said simply. No preamble, no diplomatic dancing. "You have done what no other species in 3 million years accomplished. You have proven that the Dominion is not invincible." Chun nodded slowly. "We fought because we had no choice. You gave us the option of submission or extinction. We chose a third path. Victory," Vexera acknowledged. "Though it cost you dearly. 2 million dead," China agreed. 30 colonies damaged or destroyed. An economy mobilized for total war. Yes, it cost us. But we would have paid any price for our freedom." Vexera was silent for a moment. "I told my council that you were different, that you had evolved strengths we did not possess. They did not listen until it was too late." "What are your terms?" Webb asked. "We propose a treaty," Vexera replied. "The Dominion will recognize human sovereignty over all systems you currently control. We will withdraw from your borders. We will establish trade relations and a non-aggression pact. In return, we ask that you cease military operations against Dominion territory and return any captured systems not originally inhabited by humans." Chun considered this. "And your subject species? The ones currently rebelling?" "That is an internal matter," Vexera said carefully. "No," Chun replied. "It is not. We did not fight this war just for ourselves. We fought for the principle that strength does not grant the right to dominate. Any treaty must include provisions for self-determination of sentient species." Vexera's eyes narrowed. "You would dictate terms to us?" "We won," Chun said simply. "Yes, we would." The negotiations took 3 weeks. In the end, the treaty included provisions that would have been unthinkable to the Dominion 2 years earlier. Human sovereignty over 40 systems. Trade agreements on equal terms. Most importantly, a clause allowing subject species to petition for independence. With human support if needed. As Vexera prepared to leave, she asked to speak with General Chun privately. They met on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "I must know," Vexera said. "How did you defeat us?" "We are individually stronger. Our technology is more advanced in many ways. Our civilization has existed for millions of years, while yours is barely beginning to reach the stars." Chun was quiet for a moment. "You want the truth? You were too strong for too long. You never had to innovate because power alone was always enough. You never had to cooperate because you could dominate. You never had to adapt because nothing challenged you." "And humans?" Vexera asked. "We spent 10,000 years fighting each other," Chun replied. "Every tactic we used against you, we developed against other humans. Every weapon, every strategy, every trick came from fighting opponents who were just as intelligent and adaptable as we were. We learned that wars are not won by the strongest, but by the smartest and most determined." "You learned to be worse than your enemies," Vexera said quietly. "Yes," Chun agreed. "We learned to be worse, to fight dirtier, to accept losses that would break other species. to turn every weakness into a weapon and every strength into a liability. The dragons were powerful, probably the most physically powerful species the galaxy has ever known. But you forgot that power without adaptation is just a target. Vexera spread her wings slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. My people will remember this lesson. It has cost us greatly, but perhaps it will make us wiser. And humans will remember that we are not alone in the galaxy, Chun replied. That our strength comes with responsibility. We did not fight to become the next dominion. We fought to ensure no species has to face what you offered us. They stood in silence for a moment. Two warriors from vastly different species, both understanding that the galaxy had changed forever. 6 months later, the treaty was ratified. The Dragon Dominion withdrew from human space. 3 subject species immediately declared independence, with 7 more following within a year. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted in ways that would take centuries to fully unfold. Earth became a symbol across the galaxy. The small blue planet where a fragile species had defeated the ancient dragons. Other civilizations studied human tactics, human technology, human philosophy. Some with admiration, some with fear, all with respect. General Chun retired 2 years after the treaty. She spent her remaining years teaching military history, always beginning her lectures with the same story. The story of how humanity faced extinction and chose to fight. How they turned weakness into strength and fear into determination. Her final lecture ended with the words that became humanity's unofficial motto in the galaxy. The dragons were powerful, perhaps the most powerful species ever known. They had strength, technology, and 3 million years of dominance. They thought that was enough. She paused, looking at her students. But we were worse. Not because we were stronger, but because we refused to accept that strength was all that mattered. We adapted. We innovated. We cooperated. We did whatever it took to survive. That is the human legacy. Not that we were the strongest, but that when faced with impossible odds, we found a way to win anyway.